I'm Mark Golub. Welcome to another Shalom TV special hour addressing Israel in turmoil. As Shalom TV keeps you as informed as possible on these difficult times Israel is confronting once again. And as someone emailed me yesterday, what a terrible mess. You know, it's as if the equilibrium has been punctured and Israel is suddenly immersed in a torrent of chaos and violence. In the last 24 hours, Hamas in Gaza has fired more than 130 rockets at cities in Israel. And as we quoted a Hamas spokesperson yesterday, they promised that their rockets can now reach virtually every city in Israel. Rockets have been launched at Tel Aviv and even further north at Herzliya. And just as we were going on the air now with this special, I was informed that in the city of Jerusalem, all public shelters have been ordered open, so that I believe now Israel is realizing that Jerusalem is now also in peril. I showed you earlier today with Ron Jacobson that Israelis now have on their mobile phone a new app designed by Israeli developers, which sends out a warning signal anytime a Hamas rocket is fired at Israel. And the app shows on screen which Israeli city the rockets are heading for, Sderot, Tel Aviv. This tells you that right now, as we are live here at the Shalom TV studios, a rocket has just been fired. And if I look on my screen, it's been fired at Bet Shemesh. And there is such a presence to this app. It brings you right to Israel. But any of you can download it as well. Somebody in my ear, remind me what this app is called in case any of our viewers want to put it on their phone. Red Alert. You can all download if you have a Red Alert Israel. If you have an iPhone or any kind of mobile device that downloads apps, you can put this on your iPhone. And what happens is you feel you're there. And on the one hand, there's something frightening about it. On the other hand, it ties one to the state of Israel. I am not turning this off throughout the hour. Anytime Israel endures another Hamas rocket attack, you and I will know it. We will know it here on screen. And I apologize. Again, I have to talk to my control room. You're ahead of me again. Come on back down. Come on back down. Good. You know, Shalom TV's Ron Jacobson still has family in Tel Aviv. And when Ron's phone goes off time and time again here in the office, he checks to see if a rocket is headed for his home city of Tel Aviv. And after Ron received a warning of a rocket headed for his city, Tel Aviv, he texted his wife, who texted him back that she and their 2 children are already in a bomb shelter with Gracie, their golden retriever. You know, while it's somewhat comforting to find things to make light of, the harsh reality is that Israel is once again under attack. And Israel's Defense Forces, the IDF, is in the midst of a major military operation called Operation Protective Edge. And of all of us who care for the safety and well-being of the Israeli people and for the security and future of the state of Israel, all of our attention is on events in Israel and tensions between Israel and the Palestinians. And so to give us a sense of what's happening on the ground in Israel and what the IDF may be preparing to do, we're extremely fortunate to have on our phones in just a few moments. We'll be talking to a spokesperson for the IDF from Jerusalem who'll be able to give us an update. So stay with us, and we'll have Libby Weiss on the phone as soon as we can. By the way, I also want to mention, I said that I received an email from someone who said, what a mess. I also want to tell you, I have received some of the loveliest and most encouraging of emails from so many of you who are thanking me and Shalom TV for this programming we've been providing you as we try to keep you abreast of as much information as we can. And that's that's really one of the most important aspects of Shalom TV. There's so much about Shalom TV. You know, our tag is we celebrate all things Jewish. But being able to keep you abreast of events at this point in time when Israel is in the midst of horrific events that are really, again, Israel's at war. On the one hand, it's been at war since 1948, one long war with, battles in between. But the truth is that when Israel is in the midst of this kind of living situation, one of the most important things we can do here at Shalom TV is keep you abreast with as much information, first-hand information as possible. And I am so glad that so many of you appreciate what we're doing. And I also only wish that cable systems and television providers that have not yet added Shalom TV will do so in the near future. Time Warner Cable and Verizon and DirecTV and Dish, and again, all the cable, every television provider should have this kind of programming, which is seen nowhere else on American television. And if you have family or friends with Time Warner or DirecTV, encourage them to be in touch with their television provider. And then at that point, we can really be seen by everyone, and you can share our programming with people you love. Anyway, that's what I hope happens in the very near future. Right now, I understand we have Joshua Hantman on our phones. Hansman, I want to make sure I get the name right. Give me a second. We're going out of order. You're now getting behind-the-scenes look at television. We're going out of order. We're going to Joshua Hantman, a senior advisor to Ron Dermer, Israel's ambassador to the United States. And it's just a pleasure to have Josh on the phone. Josh, thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you, sir.
Josh, one of the things that we wanted to know was the extent to which the international community and the United States of America is in some way supporting you and Israel at the present time. To what extent have you, received some kind of pushback? Let's start with the United States. To what extent has the United States been supportive of everything Israel has had to do in the last 2.5 weeks?
Well, so I can't talk to the attitude of the whole international community. I'm here representing the State of Israel in the United States, in your nation's capital, and I can say that the White House today came out with an extremely strong statement of support, and my boss, Ambassador Dermer, was actually in the White House today, and he personally expressed his gratitude to the President for this strong statement of support, because they understand that Israel is facing a reality that no country would stand for. No country would tolerate the barrage of rockets and missiles and mortars. Over 200 in the last few days. This is unreal. We have Beersheba, Tel Aviv, Ashdod, Jerusalem, all under fire today. And we appreciate the fact that the White House has come out with such a strong statement of support during these tough times.
And what about the European Union? I know, again, you're with Ambassador Dermer, and therefore your prime responsibility is the United States. But in general, can you give us any sense of how the diplomatic community has responded to Israel's actions?
As I said, I'm based here in your nation's capital, and I'm working with the United States of America and in Israel's embassy in Washington. And so I'm focusing really on the American-Israel relationship, which is stronger than ever. I can point that out, whether it's the strategic relationship or defense relationship, intelligence sharing. We have an extremely strong relationship, and once again, the Americans have been very, very strong with their statement of support in Israel's right to defend itself. So we're facing a battle here against Hamas, an internationally recognized terrorist organization. And you asked about the international community. I mean, the EU, America, Canada, Egypt, Japan, they all recognize Hamas as a terrorist organization that fires at our civilians while hiding beneath their own civilians. They're guilty of a double war crime. I mean, and Hamas is not just a terrorist organization, it's actually a genocidal terrorist organization. They call for the death of Jews all around the world. And the fact that the international community as well see them as a terrorist organization, it further justifies our fight against terror. And we will do everything we can to restore peace and quiet to the south.
That is wonderful, and you know, I believe it's not simply the American Jewish community that is supporting you and is behind you and is encouraging you as much as possible. I believe as the administration and as Washington has indicated to you, you are feeling the presence of the American people as a whole. I want to ask you one question about how you feel the American media has handled events from the moment the 3 Israeli teens were kidnapped, and we now know, Josh, they were virtually murdered almost instantly. But how do you feel the American media has handled things over the past few weeks?
Well, I mean, the American media it's a broad question.
Yes,
it's a broad question, and of course we've got internet, radio, TV. I apologize about the phone going here. The fact there are rockets landing almost every other minute, so our phones are going
We're
crazy
following
here in
it
the
too.
office.
Don't apologize at all. Keep going.
But in terms of the media, I think it's important for us, and whether it's the Jewish community or our many Christian friends in the United States, to just focus on what the day-to-day Israelis are dealing with. You know, we have close to 2 million Israelis. In fact, today probably more than 2 million Israelis in bomb shelters under constant rocket fire. And there is no country in the world. I mean, we always ask ourselves this sort of WWAD question: what would America do? What would America do if 2,000 rockets, if 200 rockets, if even 2 rockets fell in downtown Manhattan or in Washington? You know, it doesn't bear thinking about. And we, as a sovereign state, you know, we waited a long time to have a sovereign Jewish state. And we're going to make sure we use that right to defend ourselves and make sure we restore peace and quiet to the south and, in fact, beyond the south now, the rest of Israel, as soon as possible and in the most responsible manner.
Look, Josh, I understand that you are a member of the diplomatic corps of Israel, and there are certain things that are appropriate for you to say and inappropriate for you to say, especially when you're on national television. It's one thing if we had the opportunity to have dinner together. So I'm going to ask you a question, but you have the right to duck it.
Thank you, sir.
I'm watching as much of American television coverage as I can. I also listen to the radio when I can as well, but I'm more concerned with how this all the events of the past couple of weeks are being played out on American television, contrasting it to other events in other countries. The kidnapping of 50-some-odd Nigerian girls, which was horrific, received a certain kind of play in the American media and received enormous attention in Hollywood, and it was on virtually every newscast every day. When the 3 Israelis were kidnapped, some television networks did not deal with it at all. Some of the cable networks like MSNBC, Fox, CNN did a little bit. But I'm watching Fox coverage last night, and they have a crawler on. And to the extent to which you're comfortable, I do want you to comment on this. There's a crawler, a news crawler at the bottom of the screen, which talks about what Palestinian and Hamas militants, the word is militants, are doing in their assault on Israel. And Josh, it'll be interesting to see if you agree with me. I believe words are very powerful. Words matter.
Well, sir, I promise you, I don't need to duck your question because it's a very easy question. Hamas is an internationally recognized terrorist organization.
Yes. Yes.
I'm not gonna relate to individual media.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know.
Okay. Fair enough.
What I'm going to tell you is that the international community, the Americans, the Europeans, as I said, the Japanese, the Canadians, the Egyptians, they all recognize that Hamas is a terrorist organization. And what we would like to see is the Palestinian Authority put their money where their mouth is. They've criticized the kidnappings, while Hamas have actually supported the kidnappings. And they carried out the kidnappings, and they're calling for more kidnappings. And we've actually called on the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, to come out against Hamas and break up this unity government, because he's in a unity government with an internationally recognized terrorist organization. And quite frankly, we believe that we cannot negotiate with any government that's backed by a terrorist organization. And I think the international community needs to stand by Israel in that stance, because, as I said, they already recognize Hamas as a terrorist organization.
Yes. Well, again, you don't have to comment on any specific television source. I will simply say I thought it was shameful that Fox used the word militant rather than terrorist in its description of Palestinian or Hamas. operatives who were, sending rockets against Israel. I also saw your boss, Ron Dermer, on television this past Sunday address the terrible murder of a Palestinian teen by a group of Israeli youth. And I thought he was fabulous, Josh. And I thought it was fabulous to hear him say two things that I'd like you to comment on. One, he was unequivocal in the fact, by the way, I have to take a step back, Josh. Ron was talking about the beating of a Palestinian who had gone from the United States to Israel and was caught in a, basically in a Palestinian riot by Israeli police, and he was beaten. And some amateur videographer with a cell phone took pictures of Israeli soldiers beating a Palestinian boy. And Ambassador Dermer was on television Sunday and said two things. Number one, any IDF police, any Israeli police or IDF soldier who's engaged in brutality will be punished under Israeli law. He also said, however, that sometimes the context is not given fully, and that in fact this youth was not an innocent bystander. The police earlier had, I think 3 days earlier, had arrested him as part of a major disturbance, attack on Israeli police, in which 15 police had been injured, and this was a cousin of the boy who had been murdered by Israelis. And he had gone over there, and he was not simply an innocent bystander. And I thought that for the ambassador to say both of those things on national American television was a very important thing for Americans to hear, for me to hear. And I'm just wondering if you have any additional comment you'd like to make.
I would first of all like to say, I actually just saw my Twitter, and I've seen that you've quoted me. I didn't stress that it's shameful for Fox News to use the word militant. You have to make sure you quote me accurately, because I've just saw the tweets you put out. What I said is that the international community sees Hamas as a terrorist organization. So it's a good job I've got my Twitter open, because it's important that you quote me correctly.
But I didn't quote you. I just want to make sure. I haven't quoted you at all.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that's clear. I'm not speaking about any individual station here. I'm talking about
absolutely.
the stance of the international community.
I did not quote you at all. I tweeted last night after I saw Fox call Hamas militants rather than terrorists, that Fox was doing something inappropriate. I did not involve you at all.
Okay, but as for the ambassador's statement over the weekend, I think he was very clear and categorical that Israel is a country with the rule of law. If anyone breaks the law, whether they're in uniform, whether they're out of uniform, if there's any excessive use of force, they will be punished. Whether this kid was an innocent bystander, well, the fact that he was surrounded and with a group, actually, of masked rioters in a mass mob riot with petrol bombs and Molotov cocktails, and 3 of them had knives, suggests that he wasn't an innocent bystander. But that does not excuse excessive use of violence, and if excessive violence was found to have been used, then the perpetrators will be punished. We're a country with a very strong judicial system, and anyone who breaks the law will be punished.
Josh, I can't thank you enough for giving us some time. I hope we can call upon you again when situation warrants, and I do hope that the next time we talk, we'll be talking about happier events. But I thank you for some time on Shalom TV.
Thank you very much, sir.
Joshua Hantman, a senior advisor to Ron Dermer, Israel's ambassador to the United States. Well, again, you've heard this go off. Tel Aviv, for the first time, is having children go through air raid drills where they have to line up and go to bomb shelters. I told you just before we went on the air, Jerusalem is opening its public shelters, and a few moments ago someone told me in my ear that sirens have gone off in Jerusalem. In any case, it's important to get a sense of how the city of Tel Aviv is handling this and dealing with this new reality. And so I'm very pleased to bring on to our phones from Tel Aviv the Foreign Affairs Advisor to the Mayor of Tel Aviv, Eytan Schwartz. Eytan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Eytan, first, by the way, it's very late in Israel right now. I guess it's coming up on 11 p.m., between 10 and 11 p.m. But I do want to know, what's your feeling of the mood of the residents of Tel Aviv, the citizens of Tel Aviv, how are you handling this sort of new reality for you?
Let's just put everything in perspective, if you will. There was one siren that went off 3 hours ago. There was a rocket that was shot from the Gaza Strip, and it was intercepted above the town of Rishon LeZion, the city of Rishon LeZion, which is a suburban town or adjacent to Tel Aviv. So I should put that in perspective. Not that that's not alarming and not that that's not something we should be concerned about, but this was one rocket. It was intercepted. There were no injuries and nobody was hurt, nor was there any damage to property. Obviously, there are millions of citizens of Israel in the southern part of Israel living at a very troubled time right now, and our hearts are with them. And obviously, symbolically, while a life is a life in Israel, obviously targeting the nation's financial and cultural center is a symbol, and it's an escalation. We hope that the one siren that went off today is also the last one. It was definitely surprising in the sense that last round, that was about 3 years ago, there was some time of escalation before two rockets back then were shot towards Tel Aviv. Now it essentially took about 48 hours. So I would say that the Tel Aviv public was not really prepared in the psychological sense of the word. I don't think people were anticipating it would happen tonight, but everybody was prepared in terms of public services. All the public shelters were open and clean and functional. So in that sense, the city was prepared.
You know, it's a long, long time ago. I was a real child. You know, a million years ago, I remember being in public school, and it was in the height of the Cold War, and we were taught as children in elementary school that if an air raid warning went off, we would get under our desks as if that was going to protect us from some kind of nuclear weapon, or we should go into the hallway like that was going to protect us from a nuclear weapon. But I remember that there were children for whom that was an upsetting exercise. And so I would imagine that even if no rocket has fallen on Tel Aviv, if children have to learn how to go from their classroom to a bomb shelter, there is something at least mildly upsetting, perhaps for some young people even traumatic in that event. And I'm not trying to as you say, let's keep this in perspective. I don't want to overestimate it, but I also don't want to trivialize what the Israeli people have to deal with, especially when they have children who might not understand and be able to put it into perspective as you have. And Eytan, I just wondered if you could comment on that.
Absolutely, by all means. My son, who's 5.5 years old, he was at the swimming pool today. I wasn't with him. I was at work, and it was very alarming for him because this is not a reality he knows. Unlike some of the kids living in Israel in the southern part of the country, which unfortunately this has become part of their daily lives for the past decade. My son, who lives in Tel Aviv, does not know what an air siren is. It's the first time he ever heard one. He is at the age that he understands that somebody is trying to attack him, and obviously he does not understand why, so that's very distressing to him. And my two younger daughters essentially didn't know why everybody was rushing out of the apartments and going down to the bomb shelter. So that's obviously that's an irregular situation. It makes no sense. And I'm definitely not trying to underplay that. There makes no sense in trying to attack innocent people living in the heart of a large community anywhere in Israel. Having said that, and again, I want to stress, this city has always been about going back to normal, not allowing terrorism to hurt our normal pace of the day. I live in this area which is quite popular among clubbers, and I'm looking out the window right now. You said it's late for Tel Aviv. 11 o'clock is not very late, and there are people walking down the street on their way to their clubbing adventures, and there are people on their way to the bars and the pubs. So life did not stop one bit in this city. It was true we were caught a bit off around 7 p.m., and then things went back to normal. So we do live in a very idiosyncratic country, and Tel Aviv is a very special city in that sense. We are part of Israel, and we're proud to be the nation's cultural and financial heart. And at the same time, we have a legacy in this city that lasts for over 100 years, which is we do not allow terrorism to stop our lives. We will not allow people that want to harm us to affect our lives, and we will go on with our daily lives. This is our response to the people that are trying to harm us.
That is beautifully said. Eytan, where are you from?
Originally from New York City.
You're from New York. When did you make Aliyah?
I made Aliyah when I was 7 years old. So I've been living here most of my life. I moved here in the 1980s. You talked about air raids, and this is a reality that Americans of a certain generation grew up in. And it's unfortunate that my generation in Israel and my kids' generation also have to grow up in a similar reality. It doesn't make any sense. There's no reason in the world, and there's no grievance in the world that would justify targeting kids and moms and dads and seeing them as military targets. But it is the price we pay for living in this part of the world. And nevertheless, we are determined to having a very normal life. In the case of Tel Aviv, which is as similar as it can be to the life a young person like myself would be leading in New York if he were in New York.
Yes. Well, by the way, in all fairness, I knew that you were born in New York, and I asked you because I wanted our audience to understand. And I want you can bring a certain perspective of being somebody who understands America and has a sense of American Jewry, whether you made Aliyah at 7 or not. And what I want you to understand one thing, and then I want you to help us understand one thing. The expression of support that has come out of the Jewish community in particular and the American community as a whole during this entire 2.5, 3-week period has been astoundingly wonderful. Not surprisingly wonderful, but it has been so large, Eytan, that I wanted to make sure you and anybody who might hear about what we're doing here at Shalom TV will hear this. And then the other thing is, for Americans, it sometimes is just mind-boggling that Israel has to deal with this periodically. Every so often, there is something that sets off a tinderbox. And then once again, the Israeli people and you and your 5-year-old child, your children, and your older, your senior citizens, and look, people of any age, have to deal with what seems to be a Palestinian attitude that Israel has no right to be, and that whether you want to make peace with Palestinians or not, there is a segment of the Palestinian community which doesn't want to make peace with Israel. And so one of the things I'm hearing here now, Eytan, that I do want you to comment on is this a problem that Israel will have to endure forever? And if it's a forever problem, does it somehow in any way diminish the rationale and importance and beauty of the State of Israel?
Well, those are two very complex questions. I will try to answer, and I'll just also say I'm seeing now on Israeli internet unconfirmed reports of maybe another targeting of Tel Aviv, but I can't say that's indeed the case. I'm just quoting what I see on various sites. There was no siren heard where I live, but you talked about periodical attacks. I grew up in a country till the age of 7, as I just told you, where, and I'm not comparing this at all, but every now and then a kid would be kidnapped from the street, never to be found again. Or somebody would be mugged on the street and then killed during that attack in a very random way. And I think the American public, or people living in urban centers in the United States, live a life where they know that they could go out of their homes in the morning and not return back home, just because that's life and it sometimes happens. And I think what you are asking about, how can that make sense? How can people live in such a situation? I think people around the world look at people living maybe in the United States or other parts of the world where that happens, also not understanding how people live. So it's not that there's any consolation in that. What we suffer here periodically, we believe there's a purpose. We believe there's a cause we're serving. We believe that it's for a better good in the future, and it's not just random violence, or at least there's a sense to all of it. I hope I managed to make that clear. Not that I'm comparing, but people grow accustomed to the type of life they lead. And as I said, when you live in Israel, you make a choice, and that sometimes there's a price to be paid, unfortunately. To answer your second question, no, I do not think this will go on forever. I think we really should work and are working and could work harder on achieving peace with the Palestinians, though this is not really that story. This is a different story. The fact that we do not have an agreement with our neighbors, we do not have peaceful relations with our neighbors is one issue. The people that are shooting at us right now from the Hamas, from the Gaza Strip, these Hamas terrorists, these are religious zealots, extremists, radicals of the worst kind. These are people that do target deliberately children, and moms and dads, and peaceful communities. They see regular human beings that have nothing to do with armed conflict as a military goal, as a military a target. So in that sense, this is a totally different, I think, story. It's obviously it's connected, and it's very hard to tell the different narratives that happen in this region. The fact that we should achieve some kind of peace with the Palestinians, or at least a solution that will allow them to live peacefully and us to live peacefully, is a mission that we should be working on harder. And I definitely belong to the political camp that believes that that's possible, and it's something that we should aspire to. And that's definitely a division within Israeli society. There are different opinions about the feasibility of that, but I think there's overall consensus on what we see right now from the Gaza Strip, from a territory that's run by a terrorist organization, in which even peaceniks like myself say what these people represent is obviously something that is unacceptable by anyone's standards in Israel.
Eytan, it is lovely to talk to you. I'm hoping that we get a chance to talk under much more pleasant circumstances, but I'd love to pick your brains and share your thoughts with the Shalom TV audience throughout America. For now, I just wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha, that you be safe, your children are safe. The city of Tel Aviv, which is one of the fantastic cities now on the face of the earth, that it does well, and it is wonderful to meet you, if not in person, then on phone. And again, I hope we talk often on Shalom TV.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Be well. Eytan Schwartz, the foreign advisor to the mayor of Tel Aviv. Earlier, we tried to reach Libby Weiss, who's a spokesperson for the IDF. She was scheduled to be the first guest on this hour, but the reality is that when we called her, she was in a bomb shelter, and so she couldn't take our call at that time. She is with us now. Libby, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. My apologies again for the delay, but as you mentioned, I found myself with my soldiers in a bomb shelter here in Jerusalem. So it just goes to show that the situation here is very dynamic and changing from minute to minute. Absolutely.
What we have received on our special line here is that Hamas is now admitting it sent 4 rockets at Jerusalem, which in some way, Libby, is unprecedented. I'm not interested so much in how you feel Jerusalemites are handling this. I do want to know how you and your colleagues in the IDF, how are you responding?
Of course. As Israelis, I think we're a tough people, and we are strong and very much understanding that we're facing an enemy such as Hamas that specifically targets civilians. This is the MO of the terror organization, to target civilians, to target civilian centers of life. At this point now, in the last 48 hours, there have been more than 130 rockets that have been launched from Gaza into various parts of Israel, into truly the centers of life here. And it's something that we have seen, that we're aware of, and it became very clear to us that the onslaught was not something with which we could continue living. And as a response, we embarked and we launched Operation Protective Edge last night, really in response to the escalation in rocket fire that the Israelis have been experiencing here, that we've been experiencing in the last few weeks.
You know, we just received word that Israeli Intelligence Minister Yuval Steinitz told CNN that it might in fact become necessary for the IDF to use ground forces. Libby, what's your guess? Will Israel be able to deal with this threat, and this threat's the wrong word, this experience at the moment, this onslaught, without having to resort to ground troops in Gaza? Or do you expect, as difficult as that might be, the IDF will be forced to use ground troops?
We are prepared for any possibility. At the end of the day, a decision to employ and expand the operation to the level of ground troops is a decision that the government here will have to make. In the event that that decision is made, then we are prepared. I mean, we are here and we understand that our goals in this operation are significant and important, and we're fully aware of the fact that this operation might expand in the coming days.
I understand. Libby, how long have you been in the IDF?
I have been in the IDF just about 3 years. 3
years. And is this a career move, or is this your service in between high school and college?
No. I'm actually in my career service now. I graduated from university in the States in 2010. So I have been in Israel since then, and now in the Army on a career track.
I see. Now, you made Aliyah from America?
Yes.
Okay. And did you come with your family or all by yourself?
I came by myself. I came to Israel in 2010, and I came on my own.
Okay. And again, just a sentence, what motivated you to do this at that time?
I've always felt a strong connection to Israel. I think much of American Jewry feels that as well. And for me, it was very clear that I could see myself building a future here in Israel, and the move then into the Army was a natural one for me.
Okay. You, Libby, bring then a rather unique perspective that not every Israeli does, because you have a real sense of what America is, what the American people are like, what the American media is like. Are you able...
Yes,
go ahead.
No, please, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I would just like to say that I think I do have kind of the ability and maybe the best of both worlds to understand both perspectives
exactly.
and both people.
And I wanted to have a sense, the extent to which you are free to do so as a member of the IDF. How have you viewed the way in which, the world media has responded to events over the last few weeks, and your sense of how the American people and the American media is responding?
I think that generally speaking, there are a lot of values that are very much similar, if not the same, between
Absolutely.
Israel and the United States and the Israeli people and the Americans. And I think at the end of the day, what we're doing here in our campaign against terror and against an onslaught of terror that targets civilians is something that the American people can very much understand. It's something that falls very much in line with our similar values. Tonight, the residents in Beersheba, which is Israel's fourth largest city, are all sitting in their bomb shelters. And at the end of the day, if the residents in America's fourth largest city, in Houston, if everybody there were to be sitting in bomb shelters as well, I think that there'd be an understanding of the experience that we're going through here.
That's a superb, as a superb example and parallel. Libby, in the early wars that Israel had to fight, there was an enormous sense of public togetherness. There was a public support of military actions that Israel took. It was not until the war in Lebanon that it was the first time there was a disconnect between what the Israeli military was doing and public opinion. To what extent do you feel the public is behind the IDF and what you're doing now, given the events that have transpired in the last few weeks?
Of course. At the end of the day, the government here accepted the decision to act against Hamas with the understanding that the residents here in Israel were unable to continue living as they were and as they are now. I think there's no doubt that the public stands behind what we're doing and understands the urgency and the significance of our operation.
Okay. One more question for you, and it comes again out of your understanding of the American people. I want to know the extent to which you feel that, in general, there is enough understanding in America and really around the world of the plight that Israel is in because of it is living under a constant barrage of attack. The attacks take different forms at different times. Sometimes it's a lot of rhetoric. Sometimes it is in the form of terrorism. Right now you're dealing with something much more severe. And what I need you to answer for the Jewish community of America, which cares so passionately about your safety and your well-being and the future of the Jewish state of Israel, to what extent should American Jews and Americans in general be worried right now for you, your friends, children, older Israelis. To what extent should we worry for you at the moment?
I think that any person, Jewish, not Jewish, really, regardless of the background, I think any person that values democracy, that values, really, at the end of the day, the foundations upon which this country is built, and that recognizes that we are fighting a terror organization whose MO is very much to target civilians and to use its own civilians as human shields. I think that at the end, anybody who recognizes that can understand what we're going through here. And of course, we are always overjoyed and overwhelmed by the support that we receive internationally. And my job as a spokesperson is to really explain what it is that we're doing to the world. And that's something that we'll continue to do as the situation develops. But of course, we are always overwhelmed by the support, and we love to hear it.
Okay. I don't know if, though, forgive me, I'm going to press you just one more time, and I want to make sure you heard my question. Should we worry for you?
We're facing a big challenge, but we're prepared to deal with it.
Okay.
I think it's the Israeli way. It's something that it's been tested many times in the past. We're facing a major challenge, and that's why we are investing as much as possible to try and combat it, and we will.
Well, I just want you to know we will worry for you under any circumstance, but more than worry for you, we have enormous confidence in you, and we give you all of our love. We send you our love and our feelings for you, and we hope you somehow can communicate the support you know exists, again, not only in the American Jewish community, but throughout the American people. I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha, and I hope I get to speak to you under happier times. You do a wonderful job. Thank you, Libby.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Libby Weiss, a spokesperson for the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, speaking to us from Jerusalem after she emerged from a bomb shelter. And again, Hamas has documented, it admits that it has sent 4 rockets against Jerusalem. It's interesting, you've already heard Eytan say in Tel Aviv that many times rockets are fired, they never land because of the Iron Dome. But at the same time, to be living, as Libby says, for an entire city, she equated Beersheba with Houston, the 4th largest city in Jerusalem, in Israel, with the 4th largest city in America. Yes, if all the residents of Houston were having to live in a bomb shelter, America would be outraged. And, you know, many of you watching, you don't come from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 10th largest city in the United States. If your community had to live in bomb shelters, A, you'd be frightened. If you have a brain, you're frightened. And then second, it would be outrageous. So it's just amazing to understand what the Israeli people are having to live with. And as I said to Libby, I know I'm communicating what many of you would say to her, that we support you and we hope that Israel really is able to come through this with a minimum amount of casualties and in safety as soon as possible. Finally, on this Shalom TV special hour, where we're providing you with as much information and context as possible, I want to also bring in now an individual who represents and can give us a sense of how the Israeli people as a whole are experiencing this from a journalistic perspective. And I'm thrilled to bring in Haviv Rettig, who is a political correspondent for the newspaper Times of Israel. Haviv, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Haviv, we've talked to somebody from Tel Aviv. We've talked to an IDF spokesperson. We've talked to someone in the ambassador's office in Washington, D.C. You can give us a very different perspective. I know you're a political correspondent, but I simply want to have a sense from you as to how you're experiencing the Israeli public reaction to what's been going on in Israel.
I think the mayor of Tel Aviv, Ron Huldai, said it best just a few minutes ago on Israeli national television. He said, everybody in Israel knows what to do when the siren sounds, when the rocket is airborne. Everybody in Israel knows to be calm. Everybody in Israel knows where their bomb shelter is. And everybody in Israel is going to get through this. I don't see panic. I don't see rioting. I don't see people stocking up on, bottled water. Hamas's strategy has been to try and drag Israel into a war, but a very limited war, a war that will allow Hamas to stabilize its own position. Hamas are in terrible, terrible straits. They really destroyed the Gaza Strip, and the Gazans living in the Gaza Strip know it. And that's really what this war is about. And they're betting that Israel is going to respond enough for Gazans to rally around the Hamas leaders, but not enough to actually harm Hamas. And I think that what we've heard in the last few hours is that the Israeli government trusts that the Israeli public is resilient enough to go as long as it takes for Israel security forces to actually do the kind of damage to the Hamas organization to change that calculation on their part.
Haviv, it's a very interesting perspective you've just shared with us, and I've heard Israelis say this more and more recently on Shalom TV, so I want to follow this up for one moment. Are you suggesting that in reality Hamas is a very weak organization now?
Hamas is desperate. Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip in 2005. And Israel's siege of the Gaza Strip didn't begin until 2006, after Hamas mounted an armed coup against the Palestinian Authority and against Fatah, and constructed in the Gaza Strip essentially its own little fiefdom, its own little dictatorship, and massively upped its own attacks on Israeli towns and Israeli cities, rocket attacks, etc., the kidnapping of Gilad Shalit, obviously. So the Gazan population knows. I don't think the Gazan population loves Israel, but I think they know that the people picking a fight with Israel and shutting down their access to the only healthy, vibrant, prospering economy in the region is their own government of Hamas. And in the last year, Hamas has done the same thing with the last border that Gaza had open, which was Egypt. Hamas took sides in the crisis in Egypt. It sided openly and it sided violently with the Muslim Brotherhood, with President Mohammed Morsi. And when the military won that particular internal political clash in Egypt, the current Egyptian government just went about systematically dismantling Hamas's ability to function in the Sinai, systematically blowing up every single one of the 650 tunnels that led from underground from the Gaza Strip into the Egyptian Sinai. You used to be able to get Kentucky Fried Chicken in Gaza because there was a tunnel that made it most of the way to the town of El Arish, where there is a Kentucky Fried Chicken, the Egyptian town of El Arish on the coast in the Sinai Peninsula. And that tunnel was closed by the Egyptian military, so you can no longer get Kentucky Fried Chicken. Of course, that was a luxury. You can't get anything. You can't get car parts. You can't get an economy. Their entire economy has now been decimated, and it hasn't been decimated by Israel. It's been decimated by Hamas's decision to follow its particular brand of warfare, ideology, whatever you call it, and end up shutting down all of its borders and attacking all of their opponents. That's why Hamas went to a unity government with the Palestinian Authority in Jerusalem, even though the Palestinian in Ramallah, even though the Palestinian Authority was actively negotiating with Jerusalem a peace process that Hamas opposes, and that's why Hamas has now gone to war.
Is it
to try and rally the people around them?
I understand. You've said it very, very well. Is there any chance that either this specific action, this period of time, or something in the near future could, I don't know what the right word is, vanquish Hamas, that Hamas would simply sort of fade out of the picture?
There's no easy answer to that. And one of the ways you know that it's not an easy answer is that question is at the center of the major debate happening right now in the Israeli cabinet. What is the goal of this operation? Is the goal of this operation, as Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman or Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee Chairman in the Knesset, Zev Elkin, have argued at different times, the retaking of the Gaza Strip? Is the current operation, is the goal merely to teach Hamas a very, very limited lesson that every 3 years it will shoot rockets, every 3 years we're going to smash them, and every 3 years we're going to buy the next 3 years of quiet? Which some ministers have said openly, some senior members of Knesset have said that, the best we can do is the term in Israel is mow the lawn. The lawn grows high, and then you mow it, and then it brings it back down, and then, 3 years later, Hamas will once again try and test our resolve and our resilience. And those are the two edges. And between those two positions are a whole bunch of different positions in the Security Cabinet.
Okay.
So the question is, can Hamas be vanquished? Can Israel carry out an operation that vanquishes Hamas without carrying out too much damage to civilians in Gaza? Hamas, of course, hides behind civilians. Every single rocket has been fired from civilian-populated areas. So I'll leave you with the question. It's a great question.
Okay. Do you expect Israel to have to use ground forces in Gaza in this operation?
Israel doesn't want to.
Right.
Israel passionately doesn't want to. But I can tell you that the cabinet has given the army the authority to call up to 40,000 troops, reservists, to free up active duty soldiers on the Lebanese border, on the Syrian border, in order to bring them to Gaza to prepare for a ground invasion. The army has already used that authority to call up 15,000. So the army has arrayed hundreds of tanks, more than enough to do whatever it wants to do in Gaza.
Okay, so
in terms of capabilities, Israel is certainly preparing for one, while the political leadership is very, very averse to one, and I think will only go in if the air campaign fails over the course of days and maybe even a couple of weeks to really do the damage that they want done.
Okay, it's very, very important for us to hear. You would not be surprised then either way.
I would not be surprised either way.
Okay.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, it's important to remember, is very, very opposed to armed conflict. In 2012, we reached this point in November 2012, and he did not send in the ground troops. In general, he's been prime minister for 8 years, not consecutively, and over those 8 years, he has, always been averse to military confrontation. And I think that we're seeing that now. He's trying to avoid military confrontation. Egyptian intelligence has said that the prime minister, Egyptian intelligence has said that the prime minister has asked Hamas multiple times to de-escalate and been rebuffed. Now that's something we're not hearing from the prime minister's spokespeople, but from Egypt. So there's a lot of pressure not to, a lot of desire not to, and absolute willingness to do it if nothing else helps.
Okay.
The defense minister said that explicitly today.
Haviv, you are the political correspondent for the Times of Israel. Does this refer to, you cover domestic Israeli politics? Do you cover the international political, domestic, international relations between Israel and other countries?
Right, with my colleague, our diplomatic correspondent, Rafael Aaron. We cover those two.
Both of those?
They're very intertwined in Israel. A lot of Israeli policy is also foreign policy.
Okay, I have very, very little time left. Give me a thumbnail. By the way, we have this app, Red Alert, which tells us whenever rockets are being fired against Israel, and right now rockets are being fired against Ashkelon. Give me a real brief answer here. We read that there is a political struggle between Avigdor Lieberman and Benjamin Netanyahu. Give us the essence of it and where you think it's going to go.
Well, the struggle has already been resolved. They decided to split apart their Knesset list. It was ostensibly over Gaza. Of course, the events of the following day, that happened yesterday, the events of today make Lieberman's decision look a little silly, or at least the excuse he gave. it wasn't really about Gaza. It was about running in the future elections of separate parties, because when they ran together, it hurt severely Lieberman's showing in the Knesset.
Okay.
So I wouldn't, that's a sort of very inside baseball. I wouldn't worry about that.
Okay.
But I do want to say one thing to your viewers. It's important to know that Hamas's strategy overall, its overarching strategy, is a strategy that says that if it hurts Israelis enough, then Israelis will eventually leave. Like the British left India, like the French left Algeria. There's a level of pain that won't be worth it. And the problem Hamas has experienced is that Israelis don't have anywhere to go. And they feel like they're an indigenous people, and they respond like an indigenous people. So Hamas is pursuing the wrong strategy against us. They can hurt us a little bit. They can get these pinpricks. They can hurt us even a lot with suicide bombings, etc. But at the end of the day, they can't win. They're using the wrong strategy. The day they realize that we live here and we belong here and we have cities and we have 2 million school children is the day they're going to change their strategy, and that's the day they're no longer going to be Hamas, and maybe we can start to have some kind of peace talks with the Palestinians. That might be fruitful.
How fast! You're fabulous, Haviv. We have to talk often on Shalom TV. I hope you'll let me turn to you whenever we need some clarification of Israel's position, which sometimes seems confusing to America and American Jews.
I'd be honored.
That's very. You're doing fabulous work. Haviv Rettig, I can't thank you enough for making sure you made the time for us tonight. We will speak again very, very soon. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Haviv Rettig, political correspondent for the Times of Israel. I found him very, very interesting. Well, we hope you found Shalom TV's exclusive coverage of Israel in turmoil helpful to you. I can't say I hope you've enjoyed it, but I do hope you've appreciated the people you've been able to hear on Shalom TV. And we will be preempting Micah Halpern's Thinking Out Loud one more day. That program will air tomorrow night at 6:30, Wednesday night. Tonight at 6:30, we will continue to focus on events affecting the state of Israel. And one of American Jewry's foremost thinkers, writers, Yiddish experts, analysts of world anti-Semitism, Dr. Ruth Weiss, will be joining us at 6:30 tonight, as will be Ron Campius, the Washington bureau chief of the JTA, the Jewish Telegraphic Society. My thanks for this special TV hour of Shalom TV to Sloan Copeland, our director, fabulous job. Serge Goldberg, production coordinator, fabulous job. Dara Golub, associate director. Our producers this afternoon, Carol Lilienthal, Ron Jacobson, and in master control, Mark Baker and Corey Sivikoff. As always, I thank you for being part of the Shalom TV family. Until 6:30 tonight, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.